Yep. All right. Welcome to the Dr. Anita Show. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're here live, I appreciate it. Make sure that if you have any questions or comments as we go along, you can grab a seat next to me and you can ask them to me either through video or audio or both. If you don't want to be on video, that's just fine too. I understand some people are just, not ready to be on video. Or if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box right over there. If you're watching live, you can ask me a question and I'll answer it as best as I can. So what we're going to talk about today is a very important topic. And yes, Maria, actually my assistant extraordinaire that you all know, Maria reminded me you can just do audio. You don't have to do video. Actually last week we had someone call in from Germany, which was so exciting. And the week before that we had someone sit in from Israel. So it's a very international show. It's very nifty, this blab format, pretty exciting. But you can do just audio. If you don't want to do video, if you don't want to be seen, that's fine. We're today going to talk about depression. And the reason is over the weekend, I had a friend of mine message me through Facebook. She said that she had just seen some sort of a post or an article online or something to the effect that 1 out of every 3 people suffer from depression in the United States. And she asked me if that statistic is true. And I told her the short answer is no, that's not true, that 1 out of 3 people are clinically depressed. But the longer answer is actually quite a bit longer. It's a lot more complicated than simply, is this statistic true or not? And I hope to unpack all of that through the next half hour or so as we talk about this very important topic of depression, because depression is it's serious. It's not just something that somebody experiences internally. It's not just a time where you feel ill at ease in your own mind and where it doesn't affect anybody else. You hear me talk a lot about stress and how stress is not just an internal experience. It does affect people around you and things around you. And it is very much the same way with depression. And as we talk about it, you'll begin to see why and understand how that is. So I do want to give you a disclaimer, the all-important disclaimer to make my attorneys happy, which is that this is for entertainment and educational purposes only. I am not able to diagnose anyone. I'm not telling someone that you are or are not depressed. I strongly urge you that if you have questioned whether or not you're struggling with depression or if it's something else, please go seek a qualified mental health professional. Now, if you don't know of a great mental health professional to go to, I would urge you to start with your family doctor or somebody that you trust and ask them for a referral to somebody who is a mental health professional. I would advise you, quite frankly, to not just go to your family doctor and get a prescription. That's fine. Some people do need medication, but please don't stop there. What we know about depression is that depression is treatable, but not just with medication. There is a psychological component, a mind-based component to depression that can't be fixed with medication. That's where the talk therapy comes in. So go to your family doctor for sure. That is a first step towards getting some help, but don't stop there. Make sure that you take one step farther and go to a licensed or a qualified mental health professional to get fully evaluated. And that evaluation is pretty important, which I'll explain here in a second. So first of all, so just to let you know, so this is, I don't want you to diagnose yourself. I am going to give you the diagnostic criteria for depression. Do not diagnose yourself, because you'll sit there. I'm going to go through this list and you'll think, oh, I have every single one of these. Oh, I must be depressed. And it's actually called the medical student syndrome, that maybe you go online if you've ever gone to like WebMD or something, or if you're having some weird symptom and you're searching for it online and you come up and you have this horrible, incurable disease, when in fact it's something that's relatively minor, but in your mind, you kind of blow it up into something much more major than it actually is. And there's a strong tendency to do that with psychological problems as well. So don't do that. This is just a place for you to start. It's just to give you some information that you can then take to your mental health provider and kind of explore this more. And I say this because with mental health issues specifically, there's a degree of severity with each of the symptoms. So for instance, I'm going to go through each of the symptoms, and I have personally probably experienced every one of them at least once in my life. Most people have. That doesn't mean that I've been depressed my entire life. So a licensed mental health provider, it will be able to tell you that, oh, the degree of severity that you're experiencing with a particular symptom is normal. It doesn't mean that you're depressed, or it actually does cross that threshold into, okay, we need to really think about the fact that you might be depressed. You sitting there on the other side of the screen watching this, you can't sit there and be able to adequately answer that question yourself. One of the advantages to going to a qualified mental health professional is that they've had tons of experience. They know what a depressed person looks like versus someone who's just struggling with something called an adjustment disorder, which, by the way, is a diagnosable condition, but it's not nearly as severe as depression, but it has many of the same characteristics and many of the same symptoms. And a qualified mental health provider will be able to help you figure out which is the appropriate diagnosis that you may or may not have. The other issue is maybe you're just struggling with normal life stuff. It's not anything diagnosable and it's still within the normal realm. You may not like it. I'm not saying that you have to stay in that area where you don't feel good anymore, where you emotionally are struggling, excuse me, but at least you'll know that you're not depressed. And that's relevant because if you're not really depressed, you shouldn't be on antidepressant medication. And this is where I think a lot of times people kind of cross a line. We've begun to medicate people for normal life experiences. And it leads people to think they're depressed just because they're taking antidepressant medication. And it's actually muddying the waters of what true depression looks like. And so I really would strongly urge you to be very, very careful about how you perceive yourself. And whether you think that just because you're on antidepressant medication absolutely does not mean that you are depressed, especially if that medication was prescribed to you by your family physician. Some of them are really savvy with mental health stuff. They know the difference between depression and kind of just normal life experiences. Some of them are not that savvy, which is why I say that's where you start. Start with your general practitioner, your family physician, but then don't stop there. Ask for a referral to make sure that you have time to sit down with someone and really unpack all the stuff that you're going through. And that qualified mental health provider will be able to tell you whether you in fact are depressed or whether you have something else going on that's not depression, and maybe medication is not the most appropriate intervention for you. So hopefully I'll give you some basic information where you can learn about at least at the surface level. But remember, don't diagnose yourself. This is just for entertainment information purposes only. This is not meant to be therapy. It's not meant for me to diagnose you. That's impossible in this scenario. So, all right, let's get started. So my friend messaged me about this statistic that she came up with, or she found online, that 1/3 of Americans are depressed. And I thought, oh my gosh, there are some statistics that suggest that over the course of a lifetime, 1 in 5 people, Americans, will have major depressive disorder at some point over their lifetime. That is an accurate piece of information. At any one point in time, though, 20% of the population is not depressed. That's not what the statistics bear out. Over the course of a lifetime, 20% of adults, I should say, will be fall into that category of being depressed, but not 30% all at one time. So the problem is people are going to their family physician and they're complaining about symptoms that seem like depression, and the family physician prescribes an antidepressant because that's all they really have time to do, first of all, and all they know to do because they haven't been trained in talk therapy. So they give the patient some antidepressant medication. Now, all of a sudden, it's tough to walk around with a prescription for antidepressants and not think of yourself, well, I must be depressed. Otherwise, why would the doctor give me antidepressant medication? So we have these people thinking that they're depressed when in fact that's not what's happening. So let me just give you a little bit of background too. So when I talk about depression, I'm talking about a diagnosable condition that has very specific diagnostic criteria that have been shown to be very accurate and reliable over decades and decades, not only of just research, like a ton of research, but actually a lot of clinical experience. Millions and millions of therapists over the years have verified that these symptoms are accurate of what they call clinical or major depressive disorder. And all the mental disorders are in a book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. I know it's not very sexy or attractive, but this is it. This is actually the old one. There's a new one out, the DSM-5. This is the DSM-4. There was a text revision after this one, and the DSM-5. The DSM-5, the newest one, is extremely controversial because of some of the differences, the changes that they made in the diagnostic criteria for different things. I'm just going to talk about depression. There's not a whole heck of a lot of controversy around that. So, all right. In order for you to be classified as clinically depressed, okay, as opposed to just kind of going around saying, well, I'm feeling depressed, because it is very normal. Everybody has days where they feel depressed. And if you were to go through this list of the criteria for depression, you could probably click 5 or 6 of them off and say, yeah, that's how I feel. But it's only for a day, maybe even 3 or 4 days in a row. That does not mean that you're depressed. So one of the most important things to know is that in order for you to be diagnosed with depression, the symptoms have to be more or less present for at least 2 weeks. Okay, so this actually rules out things like premenstrual problems, women who just have a tough time premenstrually with their mood. It also rules out just because the weather's bad and people just are in a bad mood, or situational type things that may produce momentary or temporary feelings of depression. The symptoms have to be more or less present for at least 2 weeks. And so that really rules out a lot of stuff that people normally go through where they feel they're depressed for a day, but you're not truly depressed in the way that antidepressants at least will help you. So these symptoms have to be present for at least 2 weeks. So what are the symptoms? Well, there are about 8 or 9 symptoms actually altogether. In order to be diagnosed with depression, which we are not doing here. I'm not diagnosing anybody. This is all information that's publicly available. And I don't want you to diagnose yourself. You can't actually, because another thing is when you're depressed, you don't think clearly. That's one of the symptoms of depression. And so it's actually kind of not possible to be an accurate interpreter of your own condition. You need an outsider to really help you figure this out. So it's not really great to try to diagnose yourself. So don't do it. And I'm not diagnosing you either. Go to a qualified mental health professional. Okay, so one of the criteria, remember, these symptoms have to last for at least 2 weeks. One is fatigue, physical and mental fatigue, where you just feel really tired, okay? And it can be to the point where you actually go to sleep, where you sleep a lot, or it could just be really, really low energy, okay, really low energy. Now, the tricky part of that is that there's a lot of medical conditions where fatigue is a component. Of course, problems with your thyroid is the first thing that comes to mind. So just because you're really fatigued, and you might also have some of these other symptoms, you could have a thyroid problem and not depression, which is, again, another reason it's really important for you to get in front of a qualified mental health professional to help you figure out what's going on. So fatigue is one of the symptoms. And by the way, you don't have to have all of these symptoms. You just need at least 5, and they need to be more or less present for about 2 weeks. Another symptom is weight fluctuation. So either weight gain or weight loss. It can go in either direction, and it's unintended. Okay, so these are oftentimes when people are depressed, they unintentionally end up gaining weight because sometimes when we're depressed, we eat more. Or sometimes people who are depressed actually eat less. They don't eat as much. And it's not an intentional desire to either lose or gain weight. It's very, very unintentional, as a matter of fact. They're not trying. They just can't help it. So any kind of weight fluctuation that's unintended. And there's actually an amount of, they look at about 10%. So where you have a difference of 10% of your body weight plus or minus. So either losing or gaining weight, about 10% unintended weight loss or weight gain. Another criteria of depression is sleep disturbance. So some people who are depressed, they sleep a lot. And I mean sleep. This is different than fatigue. The fatigue is a lack of energy. You can be fatigued and just but not necessarily need to sleep. You can just have to sit around because you don't have the physical energy and or the emotional energy to do something. But sleep disturbance is something very different. And so some people who are depressed actually sleep a lot more and a lot longer than they normally do. And again, they don't want to, but it just happens. They feel like they have to. Or you can have the reverse problem. You can have insomnia. So other people who are depressed don't sleep enough. They either have trouble falling asleep, but the more common symptom is that they wake up in the middle of the night and they just can't get back to sleep. And sometimes they stay awake, or sometimes they get back to sleep and then their sleep is disturbed. And so it just kind of becomes a vicious cycle. But some sort of sleep disturbance, either insomnia or what they call hypersomnia, which is sleeping too much, that's a biggie. Actually, most people who are depressed, if I had to pick one symptom that most people with depression have, it's some sort of disturbance with their sleep. Okay. It's certainly not, you don't need to have that, but that's probably the most common thing that I hear from people. And I'm actually of the opinion that having a sleep problem, especially having insomnia, actually causes other secondary problems, particularly chronic pain. So if you have a problem with fibromyalgia or headaches or back pain or something like that, if you're depressed, and then you have sleep problems, particularly insomnia on top of it, that lack of sleep actually makes the pain symptoms worse. So that's why depression is not just something that you just exists in your own mind. It really does have effects way beyond just your internal experience. Okay. So sleep problems, big problem with depression. Another issue that people find when you're depressed is that you have trouble concentrating, okay? Or you might have kind of a fuzziness in your mind. It's difficult to concentrate. It's difficult to focus. And again, that could also be a problem that is indicative of a thyroid issue. So you don't want to diagnose yourself. You want to make sure that get proper blood work done, all that sort of stuff. But having a problem with concentration, having difficulty remembering things. So psychologists call these cognitive errors, cognitive problems in thinking, okay? Memory problems, concentration issues, or just kind of general fogginess, feeling like your mind is wandering, that sort of thing. That's very, very common in depression. Another criteria is a feeling of worthlessness or an excessive feeling of guilt. Now, most people, women in particular, at some point in their lives, or actually over the course of a normal day, end up feeling guilty and inappropriately guilty, because that's just like the condition of motherhood, right? But so people who are depressed, though, they have an inordinate amount of guilt. I mean, they just walk around feeling like the weight of the world is on their shoulders and they are letting the world down all the time. It's very, very dramatic. So it's very important that you understand that it's not just momentary feelings of guilt. I mean, it's like a true belief that you are really screwing up in a very fundamental way. Oh, excuse me. I forgot to mute the phone. Sorry about that. I usually mute the phone. I forgot to mute my other phone. I guess I'm not concentrating today. It must be the weather. Feeling worthless is a big deal. And that might be probably one of the hallmarks of depression that a lot of people are familiar with, is their self-concept. You feel like your self-concept is really takes a hit. So you feel worthless. You don't feel like that whether you lived or died wouldn't really make a difference, that you're not bringing anything worthwhile to the table anymore into life. And and you really believe that, and you believe it over, remember, at least a 2-week period of time. I think most people feel that way momentarily at some point, and then it just kind of goes away. They either talk themselves out of it, or it's just this blip in the screen. So this is not that. Oh my gosh, this phone is driving me crazy. I apologize. But it's not that. It really is a chronic sense of worthlessness. They believe they're worthless. Okay. So you just want to make sure that that's not, that it lasts for at least 2 weeks, and not, if you feel that way even for just a couple of days in a row, that's not depression either. That's still within the realm of normal experience, believe it or not. Okay. So another thing is that people feel depressed people feel very helpless. Sometimes this goes along with feeling worthless. Oh my gosh. So I apologize. Too many people are calling. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I just think I hung up on somebody. So anyway, they feel very helpless, and this does go along with feeling worthless. So they believe that they can't control the things going on in their environment, the different events that are going on in their environment. They feel helpless, and they feel helpless to even control how they feel. They feel helpless to change the circumstances in their lives, and they don't believe that they have any control over what's going on. So it's a very, very depressing, as you can imagine, experience. And so feelings of helplessness. And then this is probably the experience, the next one that I'm going to describe is the most bothersome, and that's feeling hopeless, without hope. So as a psychologist, when I was working as a psychologist, whenever someone would come to me and I would either detect that or they would just blatantly say, I don't have any hope, that's where red flags would go off in my head, because that's the single biggest predictor for suicidal, what we call suicidal ideation, or people who have either fantasies or ideas or wishes to die. Okay, a sense of hopelessness. It's one thing to feel helpless, to feel like you can't really control events in your life, and you'll feel pretty down about that, because who wouldn't if you believed that things were going on that you had no control over? But to feel hopeless, that things will never, ever change, nor will they ever get better, that's where things get scary. And so if you are listening to the sound of my voice and this describes you in any way, shape, or form, there's a part of you that feels hopeless, I cannot urge you enough to go immediately to a licensed mental health professional to get help right away. That's not anything that you want to mess around with. Okay. Even though technically to be diagnosed with depression, you would have had to have that experience, that feeling for at least 2 weeks. Don't wait 2 weeks. Okay. If you have that feeling, reach out for help, do it quickly, because it's untrue that things are hopeless for you. That is an untrue belief, and we need to help you see that that's untrue. So make sure if you have that specific symptom that you're getting help right away. Again, this is not meant to be diagnostic. I'm not diagnosing you specifically, but wow, that is something that you should be concerned about, because that's pretty serious and it's untrue that there's no hope. Okay. The other thing, another criteria is the feeling of, believe it or not, restlessness. Okay, so some people who are really depressed have a constant sense of irritability or restlessness, and they just can't ever settle down. They're chronically dissatisfied with everything that's going on, and they just, they can't be content. And again, it lasts a long period of time. It's not just something that's momentary. And remember, it all also happens in conjunction with at least 4 other symptoms too. And I say that because I can tend to get restless about stuff, not in a depressed way, but just in a, okay, I'm ready for something new sort of way. And that's not depression. That's just being restless. But when you get irritable with it, when you, especially if it's combined with a sense of helplessness and a feeling of sadness or a feeling of worthlessness, that's where things start to get a little bit worrisome. Okay. So, and what's interesting is that while most women who experience depression will tell you, I feel sad, or I feel blue, I feel depressed, whatever, men don't say that. When men experience depression, they actually tend to experience it more with heightened irritability. So that's where this particular symptom with the restlessness and the irritability comes in, and it's particularly relevant for men specifically. They don't come into your office as a mental health provider and say, I think I'm depressed. I mean, sometimes that happens, but what they'll do is they'll say, I'm just irritable. Everything's getting on my nerves. I just can't be satisfied with anything. I can't be content. They just have this chronic sense of irritability or restlessness. Okay. All right. I alluded to this before when I talked a little bit about hopelessness, but what I want to do is talk about, take it one step further. And because it is a criteria for depression, a lot of times people who are depressed will think about death a lot. Now, they don't have to necessarily think about suicide, their own personal suicide, although certainly that happens. Every year there's about 750,000 people, Americans, who attempt suicide every year. Okay, 750,000 people every year attempt suicide. So it's, depression is very, very serious. So people certainly who are depressed, they do consider their own suicide, but that's not what I'm talking about necessarily. Sometimes people who are depressed, they just think about death a lot. They may have what we refer to as passive suicidal ideation. They might wish that they were dead. They might just kind of have a fantasy that you would hear people sometimes in my office say things like, I wish God would take me, or I wish I would just get hit by a bus or something. They just a desire to escape their current circumstances, no real desire to actually harm themselves. And they don't even necessarily want to die. They just want to escape what's going on. And that's kind of where people start to think about death. What would the world be like if I weren't around? What would it be like for me if I weren't around? Those sorts of thoughts. Okay. And then lastly, there's just a decreased interest in activities. People who are depressed just don't want to do stuff like they used to do. The things that used to give them pleasure, that used to give them enjoyment, just don't anymore. And it's oftentimes noticeable by other people, and it's certainly noticeable by the depressed person. They just don't want to get up and do the stuff that they used to do because it just doesn't. There's no reason for them to. It doesn't provide for them what it used to provide. So these are the main criteria, symptoms of depression that a mental health provider would look for. And we would look for at least 5 of those symptoms that are present for about 2 weeks, for at least 2 weeks, in order to diagnose a person with depression. Now, if you are diagnosed with clinical depression, there's different levels of depression. There's mild, moderate, and severe. And actually, I think that's changed a little bit in the new DSM, but just it makes it easier to think about and to understand, there's different levels of depression. And again, you don't want to diagnose yourself. You want to always have another licensed mental health provider look at you and be able to go through and determine whether this is depression or something else. Other things can cause these symptoms. Like I said, thyroid, either hyper or hypothyroid, is a big problem with a lot of women as we get older. And it can cause symptoms that look like depression, but has nothing to do with clinical or chemical depression. It has everything to do with thyroid chemical. So make sure that you're properly, you are seen by someone who knows the difference. Okay. Also, drugs and alcohol use can produce these symptoms too. So if that's something that you engage in, you might want to consider stopping using those different substances because they're making you feel depressed, either while you're using them or after, or in between when you're using. Okay, you can really come down on highs and get very, very low, and so the use of drugs can be causing you to feel depressed. And you know what? In that situation, antidepressants are not going to help. Okay, like I mentioned before. So. There's different levels of depression. Again, a licensed mental health provider is going to be the best person for you to get in front of so they can look at you and help you figure out what's going on. So my friend who said to me, oh, is it true that 1/3 of Americans have depression? And I told her the short answer is no. You can perhaps see when you look at all of these criteria for depression, and you have to have at least 5 of them, they have to last for at least 2 weeks. Not everybody who thinks they're depressed is actually depressed. Why is that happening? Well, there are other life experiences, there are other conditions that are considered diagnosable. And the main one that I'm thinking of is called an adjustment disorder. So sometimes we go through a transition in life that causes us to feel depressed. It causes us to feel overwhelmed, stressed, like we just can't get our act together, like we just can't move forward. And it's not out and out depression. It's not chemical depression. It's not a depression that's caused by lack of serotonin in your brain. It's a depressive moment. It's an experience, an emotional experience that's actually kind of normal given your current situation. So maybe you've just gotten divorced, or maybe you're about to get divorced. Maybe you just moved across country and you don't know anybody, and you're just really, you're feeling alone and you're feeling stressed out. Those are what we call adjustment disorders. But what's happening is people are experiencing those symptoms, and they may be experiencing them for an extended period of time, and they end up going to their family doctor and saying things like, I think I'm depressed. I just can't get my act together. I'm feeling I can't sleep well. I can't eat well, and all this. And so, on the surface, that sounds like depression. And so you're getting a prescription for an antidepressant, and then you think you're depressed. And you take the medication. And the biggest complaint that I've heard over the course of my career with these medications is that it blunts all of your emotions, like you feel numb. And people don't like that feeling either. And so they stop taking their medication, and then they think that they just have to struggle through it. They're not reaching out for help. Now, I also in part blame the therapeutic community. I think a lot of therapists don't necessarily do their clients the best service. When someone comes in, you have to kind of engage them in therapy as best as you can right away to get them talking, to get them, to identify what their issues are, so you can really, address them and get them feeling better. Sometimes medication really does assist that process. If you are genuinely depressed, and when I say genuinely, I mean, is there a chemical thing going on in your brain that's causing the depressive symptoms? Then you know what? Antidepressants are your best solution. I have seen Some cases, not a lot, I have seen some cases totally where an antidepressant completely transforms someone's life. It absolutely does. So those are cases in my mind that the depression is being caused by a true chemical imbalance. But it is my belief that the vast majority of people who think they're depressed don't have chemical depression. They just have life experiences and circumstances that make them feel really overwhelmed and overburdened and all these other things. But it's caused not by a chemical disruption, it's caused by life. And no amount of medication can fix life. And when you, though, engage in talk therapy with a licensed mental health provider, what that person will do is help you figure out how to cope with life so it doesn't make you feel that way anymore. Okay. And sometimes that may mean making some difficult decisions in your life. Sometimes you're depressed, you feel depressed because you've made decisions that really aren't in your best interest. And then you have to live on through them. And that's where it just can feel like it's eating away at who you are as a person. And that can feel depressing. Medication is not going to make those feelings go away. It may blunt your emotions. You may feel numb with the medication, and you'll have to decide whether that's preferable or not. I don't know. I mean, that's an individual thing to consider. But it is not true that 1/3 of American adults are depressed at any one point in time. And I hope so. There are other experiences that you're having in life that can cause you to feel very overwhelmed. It can even disrupt your sleep. It can disrupt your eating, and it can make you feel helpless or can make you feel confused or overwhelmed at times. It doesn't mean that you're clinically depressed. And again, a really great licensed mental health provider will be able to help you figure that out. So if you're struggling, I urge you can start with your family doctor or your physician who you normally go see. Ask that person for a referral to someone that you can talk to. You need to have someone trusted that you can talk to, because that person is trained and they're going to be able to look at you and hear about what you're experiencing and help you figure out what's going on. And in conjunction with your family physician, because like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, there's a lot of things that can cause these symptoms. And it's not just depression, and thyroidism is the biggest one. So you want to get a whole panel of blood work done. Vitamin D deficiency can cause a lot of these symptoms. And again, it's not really depression because it's not caused by the same chemical imbalance that we know causes clinical depression. It's caused by lack of vitamin D. You can take Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft till the cows come home, but if you don't get enough vitamin D, you're not going to feel better. So you need vitamin D. So there's all kinds of things that could be producing the symptoms that you're experiencing. Having a team approach, having your physician as well as a talk therapist who's licensed and who has a lot of experience in evaluating these things can really help you figure that out. So I urge you to reach out to both of those professionals. Now, having said that, if you're really depressed, and if it's that you have a thyroid problem or you have vitamin D deficiency, no matter what's causing the depressive symptoms, you probably don't feel like you have enough energy, mental energy, to muster to go reach out to one of these mental health providers or to even your family physician. That's part of the problem with depression, is that you don't have the energy to actually get moving and actually access the help that's out there. It's really hard. So I would, in that case, what you might want to do is have a trusted friend or a trusted family member, emphasis on the word trusted, that you can confide in and ask that person to help you access the professional assistance that you need. That's usually the best way to go. And that's the easiest way to go. Sometimes it's a lot easier to pick up the phone and call a friend and just say, I'm really struggling. Can you help me find somebody that I can talk to? As opposed to calling up and making an appointment with your family physician and then going there next week and then having to go through this whole thing and then having to be kind of pushed out the door after your 5 to 8 minute appointment. And then they, write a script and then they tell you, oh, here's the person that we recommend for you to see. There's a therapist. And then there's a whole other second person that you have to call and get enough energy to make the phone call and make the appointment and get out the door to the appointment. All of that stuff is exhausting if you're depressed. So I understand why people don't access in the way that they do, because it really is hard. Leah, you had a good point. Good nutrition absolutely can help. It can help. It can't solve all the problems. It can solve some of them, but it's not going to solve all of them if you have true clinical depression. Or if you have thyroid problem, or the vitamin D, certainly nutrition and getting outside will certainly help as well. But I think it can be easier if you have a trusted person that you can reach out to and ask that person to kind of come alongside you and help you access the help that you feel too overwhelmed to access yourself, because it is hard. And the mental health system can be a very difficult one to negotiate. The other thing is that you want to find a mental health professional that you feel comfortable with, because I'll tell you what, it's just like anything else. Fit is important. If you don't feel comfortable with your therapist, you're not going to give that person, you're not going to trust them with your innermost struggles and feelings and thoughts, especially if they're thoughts and feelings that scare you or that you're worried might scare somebody else. And you might feel a little bit nervous about disclosing that to somebody. So you have to feel comfortable with that person. And the problem there is that sometimes you have to try several different people before you know that you feel really comfortable with someone. I have someone calling in. Okay, if you're an addict, okay, let me see here. Whoops. Oh, I guess did you click off? I guess so. I guess you did. Sorry about that. I guess I was too slow getting you in the seat. I'm sorry. I apologize. But again, so if you have a problem with addiction, if there's anything that you're addicted to, I urge you to go see a licensed mental health provider. That person will be able to help you in ways that I'm certainly not able to. As I mentioned earlier, this is just for informational purposes only. I can't diagnose anyone. I urge you not to self-diagnose, because if you actually are depressed, believe it or not, you don't have the distance, required in order to adequately figure out what's going on with you. And if there's a blood issue going on, if it's a thyroid problem or a vitamin deficiency of some sort or something else going on, another medical condition, you won't know that until you get somebody to look at you and actually run a blood panel, make sure everything's the way it's supposed to be. And then, of course, if it's not, you can pursue that next step. So please, please, please go get help. I don't think you should necessarily rely on just talking with your friends and your family members. If they are helping, that's great. But sometimes what can happen is that friends and family can have their own agenda, or they might not know how to deal with the fact that you're not feeling your best, and they don't necessarily know what to do with that. And so they might be dismissive of you, and then you end up feeling even more worthless. Okay, because what a depressed person would say is, oh gosh, even my friends don't want to handle what's going on with me. They can't even handle this. I must be really messed up. Those are the sorts of thoughts that go through a depressed person's mind, and nothing can be farther from the truth, okay? It is true that they don't know how to handle your depression or your emotional experience. That is very true, but there are people out there who do. And so I urge you, as hard as it is, to start reaching out to people and just, even if it's an acquaintance, if it's someone that you just know tangentially, ask them to help you figure out, how do I get help? How do I know how to pull myself out of this? How do I find someone to talk to that's licensed and that's an appropriate person? And then keep looking until you find someone that you really mesh with, because it'll make a huge difference, an enormous difference. So, all right. Are there any questions? I've been talking for a long time, and we had a bunch of people join in. Very exciting. I'm so glad that you're all here today, and I'm hoping I'm giving you some good information. Again, just for educational purposes, I can't diagnose you, and I don't want you to diagnose yourself. If you are concerned that you might have depression, I urge you to go to a licensed mental health provider, and that person they'll talk to you. They'll talk to you for about 50 minutes or 45 minutes, and they're trained to ask you the questions that they need, that they're looking for certain answers for, to make sure that you're doing okay. All right. So make sure that you reach out. This was just for educational purposes, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about depression. Then the fact is, if you go to your physician and they give you an antidepressant, and they may even diagnose you with depression, you think you're depressed, make sure that you have somebody to talk to. Oh, here we go. We have someone calling in. Let me see here. All right. Let's see if this works.
बात करिए पहले.
Hello?
Hello. Hey.
Palash?
Yeah, I am Palash.
What can I do for you today? What's up?
I am actually pretty depressed. Pretty stressful day, it seems.
Is that right?
Yeah, actually, I'm a college student and they give a lot of homework and I don't know what to do.
You should do your homework. Is that a trick question?
Yeah.
Do you have
Actually, we have a lot of pressure these days. A
Yeah.
lot of pressure.
Yeah. I tell you what, I'm going to click off here for a second. And what you can do is you can make sure that you manage your time properly. There is a lot of pressure on college students for sure. So what you want to do is you want to manage your time properly. And I did a blab on that a couple weeks ago, Maria. I'm not quite sure when it was, but I have a lot of college students call in and they need some help with time management. So that's your biggest deal there. So if you're depressed because you can't manage that, then I urge you to go do some good time management there. Okay. Oh, we have someone else. Let me see here.
Hi.
Charlene, hi. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah. What can I help you with today?
Well, you were talking about depression, and I just kind of popped in the room. It was kind of just one of those topics that kind of drew me in.
Yeah. It has a tendency to do that, I think. Yeah. I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with. Do you ever find that you feel depressed?
Oh, yeah, I think I bounced back and forth. I was on antidepressants for a while, and then I went off of them. And, my daughter was, I don't know, I think there's a difference between anxiety and depression.
Yes.
Almost.
Yep.
And I think I've been borderline on both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like the anxiety gets to me, but then I don't know, there's a certain end of you can cope only so much, and then it becomes kind of like there is no coping.
Yeah.
Sort of. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Forget about everything, and then everything piles up and it never really goes away. And it just comes back.
Yeah, it does. Life has a funny way of doing that, like it'll keep coming back. Yeah. I guess what I wonder, and I can't diagnose you. This is not meant to be therapy or anything. So I would urge you, if you're not seeing, if you don't have someone to talk to, find someone to talk to, because that really does make a difference. Now, the other thing is that, if you're feeling overburdened and like you're just juggling things and you're like just, I call it, you're operating with small margins, like you're so like you don't have a lot of leeway, like a little bit's gonna just kind of push you over. Yeah. I call that operating with small margins. And, because you don't have a lot of like one thing, and it just kind of makes your whole day or feel like your whole life kind of, yeah.
Everything just kind of, and that's how it's become. It's like my daughter, my 17-year-old, will come up to me and she'll say something like, "Hey mom, when are we going to go get my license?" And I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah. True. I know. It's hard. Okay. Yeah, I understand. I get it. I'm a mom I have 2 boys. I don't have 4 kids. I saw on your thing you have 4 kids. I don't have 4 children. So, but it is hard. So this is not therapy. I can't do therapy online like this, especially in a public place. And I wouldn't expect you to disclose anything confidential for sure. But one thing that I would urge you to do, so sometimes when people feel like they're overburdened, 2 things. One is I want you to learn to start saying no to things in your life. Okay. Is that something that you feel like you have a problem doing?
Oh yeah. Like I have a friend come over and I know we've got a ton. Yeah, I guess that's fine. Or can you babysit?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to learn to say no. And you know what? Here's the deal. You can say no, not forever. It's just that when later on in your life, when you have a little bit more time, then you can start saying yes to things. But for right now, let's learn how to say no. Okay. And feel good about it. Don't feel guilty. There's no need to feel guilty. And if you say no and you feel guilty, what you can do is you can tell the person, you know what, I would love to say yes and help you out right here, but I actually don't have the mental bandwidth right now to do this. Maybe I can help you out like next month or something like that. So that way you're feeling like you're kind of, giving yourself an excuse if that helps you to say no. But for Pete's sake, learn how to say no, because you know what? If you don't maintain your boundaries, no, there's not one other person in this entire universe who'll do it for you. Not one other person.
Something. I've got a bald spot on the top of my head.
You have what? I'm sorry.
A bald spot.
A bald? Oh, from anxiety? From?
I don't pick at my hair. I do this all the time, but yeah, I've got I think it's stress.
Yeah.
My son's on palliative care.
Oh, really?
And yeah.
Oh.
I think I'm just overstressed.
Yeah, that'll do it. Okay, so for Pete's sake, be brutal about saying no. Cut out every blessed thing in your life that doesn't have to do with your children and taking care of yourself. Okay? Everything. Everything else has to go right now. You don't have room for it. You don't have room for it. I mean, you don't. And that's understandable. So please, for your sake and for your children's sake, say no to everything that doesn't have a direct impact on your children, okay, or you, and really get rid of all of that stuff, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
And please find someone to talk to. I promise it'll make a difference.
I've been trying. My insurance does not cover it.
Okay. Are there
$180 bill when I went to go talk to somebody.
Yeah. Are there local churches in your area that you could access? Oftentimes they have counselors that they'll either offer pro bono or reduced fees in churches.
We have some churches around us.
I would pursue that. That's probably a really great option for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Good luck, Charlene.
Thanks.
All right. Oh, so her story may have sounded familiar to some of you. It sounds like she has some extenuating circumstances, though, that are pretty dramatic. So, but sometimes we create an environment that makes us depressed, and that's why I said sometimes what we experience as depression isn't chemical depression, and antidepressants aren't going to work to make us feel better because that's not what's causing our symptoms. It's life. And sometimes life is really hard to cope with. And so I would strongly urge you to find somebody to talk to. If you're in a faith community, lean heavily on them. That is what they are there for. Because that's a very important component of all of this too. And they can help you. So I was telling Charlene, if you are still listening, I want to urge you to go to a church or some sort of faith-based organization, because they will oftentimes either have counseling services available right then, like on site, or they'll know where to refer you to some places that are lower cost, that you'll be able to access some help. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, are there any other questions? We're only going to have another minute or two. So I want to thank everybody who asked a question and who popped on to give their 2 cents or to help participate in this blab. I think that this is a really important topic. And it seems like it's interesting with these blabs that the longer they go on, the more people pop on. So I should probably start them earlier and plan on just being online for a longer period of time. Because I think that this is, well, first of all, I know that depression is a very serious problem. I know it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And that's why even Charlene said that that's kind of grabbed her attention. So she's not alone. Okay. She's not the only one. But there is help out there. And having said that, the hardest part is, and I understand this, is generating the energy to access that help. That really is the hardest part in all of this, I think. So I just urge you to do whatever it takes to get that help. And you'll be glad that you did. It won't help immediately. You're not going to have immediate relief. So just to, help manage your expectations there, you're not going to have immediate relief. But you will, over time, start to feel better. You'll start to feel more hopeful. You'll start to feel more in control, more empowered in your life. You'll start to learn how to establish boundaries that will help you feel better and give you more energy for the things that matter in your life. And so you'll stop giving energy away to things that don't matter to you directly in your life. Okay. All right. Opening up and asking for help, accepting. Yes, it is hard to accept help. It is. I know that that's like the hardest part is the energy associated with doing it and actually admitting that you need help because it's hard. I get that. But you know what? Even though it's hard, you're going to do it anyway because you need to, and it's fine, and it'll be okay, and you'll be better for it. And that's you just have to tell yourself, well, it's hard to ask for help. Yes, that's true, and you still can ask for help, and it'll be okay, and it'll be better. Okay. So up until this point, you may have thought, well, I should be strong enough to be able to handle this. I should be able to shoulder this without any problems. Everybody else seems to be getting along in their world. That's not true. First of all, I can tell you for 100% fact, a lot of other people are struggling. I'm a psychologist. I know these things. And other people do have, they're going to therapy or they have people that they can talk to, a trusted group of practitioners. So yes, it's hard to accept help, but it's okay. We all need that. We all need each other. You are not an island. You were not built to endure this by yourself. In fact, you were built to need other people in order to help you get through it. And that is the truth. So that's why God put us here, is to help each other. We're not here just, all for ourselves. That's not the case at all. All right. So make sure. So it's okay if you need help. It really is. I understand it's hard to accept it, but you can learn to accept it and learn to actually thrive with it. And then you can then give back to other people, okay? But it's going to be impossible for you to give to other people when you are depleted. You need to be filled up. And sometimes we can't do that for ourselves. That's why we have other people in our lives, okay? It does feel like an island. I know. I get that. She says sometimes it feels like she's an island. Yeah. You know what? That having depression and anxiety does make us feel that way. You can feel that way, but it's not that way. Okay. So how you feel is not necessarily what's really going on. And that's the problem with depression and feeling overwhelmed. It clouds your ability to see what's really going on in the world. There are people out there who want to help you. That I can guarantee. Finding those people, yes, it's hard. I wish it were easier. It just isn't. And in many ways, it kind of can't be because, it's hard to get out of our own head. We kind of wish people would just magically know that we need help and just reach out and be able to hold our hand for us without us asking for help. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't. And it can't. I mean, we don't have access to inside other people's minds. And that's how we are. So I urge you to reach out for help and to keep reaching out until you get it. And I know that's hard. I get that. I know it is hard. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. I'm so grateful that you were all so generous with your experiences and telling me about what you're experiencing, because it's going to help actually quite a few other people who are watching this, because we'll send out the link for the recording. If you've missed part of this or all of it, you're just coming in now, make sure that you go over to the website, thefreedomprescription.com. And Maria has put up links on the live chat in the chat box there. If you scroll up, you can find the link to it, thefreedomprescription.com. If you get on my email list, you'll get a link to this recording, so you'll know when the recording is up. And also you'll get announcements of my weekly show, what the topic is going to be. And if you have a suggestion for a topic, you can email me as well once you're on my list. So go to thefreedomprescription.com, get on my email list. Make sure you do that so that you're kept up to date and that you get all the links to the previous shows and you can watch them and hopefully learn from them, and let me know what more you want to learn about, because I can talk about a lot of stuff. So I am here to serve you all, and I want to make sure I'm giving you the best and most reliable and realistic information that you can possibly receive. So go over to thefreedomprescription.com, get on my email list. And on that note, thank you so much, everyone, for your kind attention, your generosity in sharing your experiences and your stories. I'm very appreciative, as is everybody else, who are benefiting from hearing your story. So I'm very, very grateful that you did that. And I will see you next Monday for the next Dr. Anita show. So make sure that you're on my email list. Go to thefreedomprescription.com, get on that list so you'll find out what the topic is. And I'll see you next week.